In this video, I'll be teaching you how to use leftist AI to educate leftists and liberals. Because what I've been doing over the past few years is I keep going back to these AI systems and asking them questions to see if they can be honest. And what's happening as of lately, they're being forced to give more accurate and honest information, even though it goes against their CEOs and their developer teams' political viewpoints. Comparing communist, socialist, and capitalist societies, which one has the highest volume of migratory patterns drawing people from other societies to it?
Generally, capitalist societies experience the highest volume of migratory patterns, drawing people from other societies. This is primarily driven by economic factors and the promise of better opportunities. Why capitalism attracts migrants? Migration is complex, but a primary pull factor is the potential for economic improvement. Capitalist societies, particularly high-income ones, tend to have higher wages and more job opportunities. The pursuit of higher incomes is a major motivator for international migration. Workers from lower-income countries often move to wealthier capitalist nations to earn significantly more, even in low-skilled jobs. Greater economic stability. These countries generally offer more stable economic conditions, a stronger job market, and a higher standard of living, which are all highly attractive to people looking to improve their lives. Established migrant networks. Over time, migrant communities in capitalist nations create networks that provide information, support, and resources for new arrivals, making the move more feasible and less intimidating. Migration in communist and socialist societies. In contrast, communist and, to a lesser extent, socialist societies have historically seen a lower volume of immigration and, in many cases, a high volume of immigration. Communist states. Historically, communist states like the former Soviet Union and East Germany have been characterized by strict border controls, which were often designed to prevent citizens from leaving, not to attract people from other countries. The lack of economic and political freedoms and a lower standard of living compared to many capitalist nations made these countries unattractive destinations for voluntary migration. Socialist states. The term socialism is broad, but generally, countries with significant socialist policies, such as those in Scandinavia, do attract migrants. However, they are also fundamentally capitalist nations with robust social safety nets. The migration they experience is still driven by the economic and social stability of their capitalist economies, rather than their socialist policies alone. Purely socialist economies, where the state controls the means of production, have historically struggled with economic efficiency, leading to less attractive conditions for immigrants.
So the lesson here is that leftists are bananas, liars. They can't speak one shred of truth. And the reality is that people run screaming from communist and socialist societies to the open arms of capitalist societies. And there's a reason for that can't even be debated or argued, because the proof is in the pudding of the migratory patterns. That's why I find it so crazy that anybody would push for socialism or communism to take over their already well-established capitalist society. So I view those who are pushing for these type of things as evil demons that want to see the oppression of people. Look, it even says they put up strong border controls not to keep outsiders from flooding in, but to keep you from leaving. Isn't that funny? I mean, it's not funny, but it's funny because you can't talk this kind of sense into the closed-minded leftist liberal lunatic, because they are crazy people. And I wish they could be cured with some of these facts and documented realities, but I don't even think I think that it's deep within their DNA to oppose stability, order, and goodness, and what's written in their DNA is to gravitate towards hate, anger, and destruction, lies, deception. I think it's the reason why you can't bring them around with facts, reality, and common sense is because their DNA, their very DNA opposes it. It makes them uncomfortable and they wriggle with agony if you try to bring these facts to them. What is the name and race of the first American colonist to legally own a lifelong chattel slave in America?
The first person in the American colonies to be legally declared a lifelong chattel slave was John Kacer, a black man. The colonist who legally owned him was Anthony Johnson, a black man who had previously been an indentured servant himself.
Okay, so what did we just learn? We just learned that before the black Angolan man named Anthony Johnson fought so hard in the courts to create the first lifelong chattel slave in America, the first legally binding lifelong chattel slave in America was fought for in the courts by a black man against another black man. And it even says here, Anthony Johnson, in a lawsuit against his white neighbor, Robert Parker, who had taken in John Kacer after Kacer claimed his term of indenture to Johnson had expired. A white man trying to help the black man. So the white guy was trying to help the black guy who this other black guy was trying to own him lifelong. Now, the reason why people hate America and white people so much is because in our educational institutions, there are many leftists, liberals who are lying to people and brainwashing everybody by omission. They don't teach everything that they should be teaching when it comes to slavery. They cherry pick, and they cherry pick for the reason of destruction of the West, destruction of all of the Christian foundation nations that white men engineered in the West, in the Western world. I've documented many things in my videos where it shows these plans of the left stem from 1800s. And they have plans that they even claim and state themselves that their plans are slow, they're playing the long game, slow-moving actions that are meant to agitate. And one of the main places they do this in is to young people in the school systems for hundreds of years now. That's why even your grandparents and their parents, your great-great-grandparents, they were brainwashed as well. List the abortion percentages in the USA by reason.
Here is a summary of the most common reasons cited, based on a Guttmacher Institute study. 74% cited that having a baby would interfere with their education, work, or ability to care for other dependents. 73% said they could not afford a baby at the time. 48% said they did not want to be a single parent or were having relationship problems. 38% had completed their childbearing, meaning they already had the number of children they wanted. 31% said they were not ready to have a child. 12% cited health concerns, including their own health or the health of the fetus. Less than 1% reported that their parents' or partner's desire for them to have an abortion was the most important reason. Most abortions in the U.S., about 95%, are the result of unintended pregnancies. While health concerns and fetal anomalies are a factor for a small percentage of people, the vast majority of reasons are related to socioeconomic factors, personal circumstances, and a lack of readiness for parenthood.
Okay, so now we just learned that the vast majority of abortion cases in the United States are just young people, mostly just young people who are sexually irresponsible. They want to have sex, they're horny, and I get it. You know, we're all horny, we all want to have sex, but they're not being careful. So their own irresponsibility and their own immorality is leading them to murder babies in the womb. They're murdering their own children in the womb. So There's a whole lot of leftist nonsense that gets spewed by the liberal community, and they say that they need abortion. So this is where you have to fight them with facts, is that they say they need abortion for rape, incest, and medical emergencies, when in reality, those three things only make up maybe 1%, even if that. It doesn't even list that here. But those make up, it's negligible. The number of rape, incest, and medical emergency is almost nothing compared to the 99.9% of abortion cases that are, which you can see here. All these percentages of what people are claiming they're killing their babies for. And even where it says the 12% cited for health concerns, including their own health or the health of the fetus, they can just be saying that and it not be true. Now, if you're going to murder your baby in the womb, could you be a liar too? If you're somebody that could be irresponsible and immoral, wouldn't that mean you can be a liar just as easily as being that murderer? So I don't believe that 12% when they say they're concerned about health. Those are the young mothers who are in there that feel really guilty about killing their baby in the womb, so they're giving a reason that makes them not look so bad. They're citing health concerns. Nobody's proving that they have any health conditions or there's any health risk. They're just saying it. So when you debate abortion with the left, you have to come at them with these facts, because they're going to use the fact that they need it for rape, incest, and medical emergency, when it says here, most abortions in the U.S., about 95%, are the result of unintended pregnancies. That just means sexual irresponsible. They're sexually irresponsible. They're having sex too young when they're not ready, and they're not even being careful about it. All you have to do is not have sex. I'm not sure if you guys know how a woman's cycle works, but there's only about 4 or 5 days in the 30-day month. So every month there's only about 4 or 5 days when you have the best chance to get a woman pregnant. We have to talk to young women and tell them, if you're not ready to have a baby, you can't have sex. Do not have sex, intercourse. Don't have vaginal intercourse just on those 4 or 5 days. Why do you have to be such whores? You don't have to be such a big whore to where you're not ready, or financially not ready, or you're just a moron, and you're taking sperm into your vaginal cavity in these 4 and 5 days out of every month. Just skip, you still have what, 25 days, 26 days out of every month to be a raging whore if you want. And that's fine, go do that. But skip those 4 and 5 days when you're ovulating. This is what we should be teaching young women, and not what the leftists are trying to teach them, that it's okay to be sexually explore. The left preaches this kind of mantra: express yourself sexually, be as promiscuous as you like, and then kill your babies. Because the left side of the aisle is the one that's always fighting for everybody's sexual rights and sexual freedoms. Even the P's. They even fight for the sexual freedoms of the P people. And the P's, you know what I'm talking about. The P. You know what the P is. Don't act like you don't. So they want everybody to be immoral, demonic, sexually loose, irresponsible, and then murder their babies in the womb. And there's a lot being done with these baby parts, and that might be a reason why they want so many abortions. Stem cells and the baby parts are used in ways that would disgust you if you learned about it. And I could actually teach you right now, but I've talked about it in other videos about what they do with these baby parts and this baby material. Once they suck it and murder it and suck it out of the mother. List FBI violent crime statistics by race.
Murder and non-negligent manslaughter. Black or African American individuals accounted for 51.2% of arrests, while white individuals accounted for 45.8%. Robbery. Black or African American individuals accounted for 52.7% of arrests, while white individuals accounted for 44.7%.
So now when you take things in proportion, whites make up the majority of the population of the United States by far. Blacks are only 13%, I believe. So when you take those percentages into proportion, and then you have blacks committing the most violent crimes at the highest numbers, 50%, more than 50% of murder, more than 50% of robbery. These facts explain why black people have to interact with the police more. Black people might get profiled more. Black people might get suspected more. Even if you're an alien that came down to do policing here, or if you are an artificial intelligence robot that was set to do policing, you would be wise to take these factors into consideration. That would be like going into the woods with salmon and honey all over yourself, and just because one or two bears choose not to eat you doesn't mean the majority of them won't eat you. And I'm not saying white people are perfect. They have a lot of internal fixing to do in their societies with themselves. But you can't take exceptions to the rule. For instance, there's plenty of black intellectuals and black public figures that will tell you the truth, that most black people hate white people. They victimize themselves as well, and they are their own worst enemy when it comes to violent crime. Yeah, there's white on white crime. There's Asian on Asian crime. Yeah, but it doesn't even compare to what the blacks do. Not even close. So the reason why blacks are incarcerated a lot and arrested a lot and approached a lot by police is because they have a record just in general. And not all of them are bad people. I'm not saying that. There's plenty of black people who I agree with on their socio-political viewpoints, who I know are very peaceful people that want to see all the world get together in unity with all the different races. I know many black people that are that way. Which countries and races are most well known for having scam culture?
Nigeria. Nigeria is particularly known for 419 scams, also known as advance fee fraud and romance scams. These scams often involve convincing a victim to send money in exchange for a promised, much larger sum that never materializes. The country's historical association with these scams is so strong that the term Nigerian prince scam is a widely recognized phrase. India. India has become a major hub for tech support scams, phishing, and call center fraud. Scammers, often operating out of large call centers, impersonate employees of major tech companies or government agencies to trick victims into giving them remote access to their computers and/or personal financial information. China. China is most known for counterfeit goods, intellectual property theft, and sophisticated online investment scams, often using social media platforms. There has also been a rise in pig butchering scams, where scammers build a relationship with a victim over an extended period before luring them into a fraudulent investment. Southeast Asia, particularly Myanmar, Cambodia, and the Philippines. Interpol and other law enforcement agencies have identified these countries as hubs for human trafficking-fueled scam centers. People are often lured with fake job offers, then held captive and forced to work in scam factories to commit various types of online fraud, including romance scams and cryptocurrency scams. Brazil. Brazil is noted for a high prevalence of ATM scams, credit card fraud, and phishing attacks. The country's rapid digital growth and widespread use of online banking have made it a lucrative target for cybercriminals.
What nations are the biggest victims of global scam artists?
Based on various reports from government agencies, research organizations, and fraud analysis firms, the United States consistently ranks as the country with the largest number of scam victims and the highest total financial losses. Other nations with significant scam victim populations and financial losses include United Kingdom. The UK consistently ranks among the top countries for fraud and online scams. The government has even classified fraud as a national security threat. Canada. Like the US and UK, Canada is a frequent target of scams, particularly phishing and impersonation fraud. Australia. Australia also reports a high number of scam victims and significant financial losses, with scams often originating from international sources.
Which predominantly Caucasian nations were most effective in ending chattel slavery globally?
The two predominantly white nations most effective in ending chattel slavery globally were the United Kingdom and the United States. Their influence came from different approaches and at a significant cost. The United Kingdom was arguably the most effective in ending chattel slavery.
I also want to insert here that Haiti was also instrumental in their slave revolt that they had. I think it was somewhere in the 1700s or early 1800s, where the slaves revolted and were able to establish a free nation after that. But I'm asking about the Caucasian nations because everybody on the left just has it in their heads that white people want to have slaves, and white people were really the ones who sacrificed the most, bled the most, and died the most to abolish slavery globally in the modern era, or in our current civilization.
Slavery on a global scale. After building much of its empire and wealth on the slave trade, it became a major abolitionist force due to a powerful domestic movement.
And now it says that the British Empire built its wealth on the slave trade, which in those days, everybody built their wealth on slave trades. It was Arabs, Africans. Slavery is, in documented history, slavery begins with Arabs, because those are our, on clay tablets, that shows the oldest writings. And in there, they discuss how slavery worked in their society. And then, and also in Africa, before Europe even became any kind of power, Africa is well known for having slavery. And in the United States, or the Americas, the Native Americans practiced slavery. Way before white people were even a thing, really, to reckon with or worry about. All these people in the very ancient world were using slavery to prosper certain elements within their societies and certain ruling factions.
Political action. In 1807, the British Parliament passed the Slave Trade Act, which abolished the slave trade throughout the British Empire. This was followed by the Slavery Abolition Act of 1833, which outlawed the institution of slavery itself. Naval enforcement. The British Royal Navy's West Africa Squadron was established to patrol the Atlantic Ocean and intercept slave ships from any nation. This squadron captured over 1,600 slave ships and freed more than 150,000 Africans. Britain also used its diplomatic power to pressure other countries to end their involvement in the slave trade. United States.
Now, the reason why I'm showing this and asking this specific question is because leftists want to teach all of our new generations of children all around the world that whitey bad for slavery. When whitey, in the reality of history, whitey was late to adopting slavery while everybody else was doing it for thousands and thousands of years. And whitey was the one most effective in abolishing slavery globally. So it was something that everybody was doing for thousands and thousands of years. Everybody was showing a roadmap of how this is done and how you can prosper from it. And then Whitey came along and did it too. Yes, they're guilty of it, but they're the only ones that really fought so hard and long to abolish it. With the help of others, of course. I'm not saying every black person in Africa just was like, no, we want to keep slavery. Of course there was people in Africa that wanted slavery abolished. There was also a large number that didn't want it abolished, and it was messing with their pocketbooks if you abolish slavery. The same thing for every other culture in Asia, the Middle East, India, everywhere.
States. The United States' role was defined by an internal conflict that ultimately led to abolition. The American Civil War, 1861 to 1865, was fought primarily over the issue of slavery, and the Union's victory led to its formal end. Military conflict. The war was one of the deadliest in the nation's history, costing over 600,000 lives.
Now, I'd like to add a little something there, that it's not exactly true that Civil War was fought to end slavery. The North also had their slave stuff going on, but what ultimately happened was the North wanted to cut off the South's financing and their financial prosperity. So the best way to do that was to shut down the slave trade while the North was advancing technologically and becoming more modern with things. They were able to financially keep moving their train forward. They were more easy for them to keep forward progress going without slavery than it was for the South. The South was using slavery with people like Anthony Johnson and others. Anthony Johnson from Virginia, who was a black man. There were black slave owners, there was native slave owners, there was white slave owners. And they all suffered in the South because the North wanted to cut off their earnings potential. So ending slavery was a byproduct of the North and the South being opposed to each other. And they weren't opposed to each other just over slavery, because like I said, slavery was happening in the North as well. It wasn't the cause of the conflict of the North and the South. Which nations are the most attractive in migratory movements of the modern world? And I asked this question to show the evidence of which nations, when people in their own failed cultures or cultures that aren't as attractive, when those cultures fail them, they go running and screaming into the open arms of the United States, Canada, Australia and New Zealand, Western Europe. What is the predominant religion of the United States, Canada, Australia, and Western Europe? Stemming from the previous question of which are the most attractive nations in the world to people who are running from their failed cultures. It says, the predominant religion of the United States, Canada, Australia, and Western Europe is Christianity. So the reason I asked that and wanted to show you guys the answer is because Christian foundation nations, which are basically nations that were engineered and developed over the centuries by Christians, are the most attractive nations in the world, the most welcoming nations in the world, the most tolerant of other people's ideas, cultures, and religions. So that's why I say I'm going to stand for the freedoms and protection of Christians above any other, because that religion seems to produce the best fruit. At the end of the day, each religion produces a bowl of fruit. Some produce a bowl of rotten fruit. Some produce a tiny bit of fruit. So all I'm saying is Christianity, and I'm not going to become a Christian because we've invented 5,000 different religions, but out of all of those 5,000 different religions, it seems to me, just from an outsider's point of view, to be the one religion that produces the best fruit. And if most people in the world are going to be spiritual individuals and want to be in a religion, I think that one has it the best so far. They have the best moral concepts, the best tolerance, the best peacemaking abilities. Classic conservative doesn't exist anymore. People who were classic liberals are now considered far right. So what's going to happen is the pendulum is going to swing back equally hard to the right, because the leftists have pushed so far into cuckoo bananaville that now the reaction to that, which is always happening all throughout the ages, is that this political pendulum keeps swinging back and forth from lies, deception, and self-destruction to common sense, rationality, and prosperity. And it keeps going back and forth. And I think the Creator intended it to be that way, where we never sit still. We're never static. We're an amazing creature to observe and experience. We have a dynamics that no other creature can exhibit. And it's for that exactly. I think utopians are misguided fools. People who want everybody to think and act the same. That's the only way to get utopia, is to force everybody to think and act the same. If let flow naturally, you're going to have such a wide diversity of morality and diversity of thought that utopia is impossible without imposing it. Utopia is impossible without forcing it or killing off what you see as somebody differing in opinion or differing in spirituality, differing in philosophy. So people don't understand me when I say utopia is impossible for the human condition, and it would actually be wildly disastrous and murderous and sneaky. You can only get utopia if you do something evil and really sneaky to do away with anything that opposes the utopia's standards, which with the human condition is impossible unless you do something very evil. That's why utopians are among the most dangerous humans to always exist. People who believe that it is their mission to create a utopia are the most dangerous people that will ever exist.